Welcome, everyone, to joining us here on the Pipeline Report. I'm Zach Karskaden. I will be flying solo today as Pastor Tim is down and out with the weather. He probably caught what I caught as he's been around me and my boys and family for a while. We've just been going through the cold and flu season, so please pray for us. Pray for him as he makes his way through this health journey, as it's just a little stumbling block here as it's getting colder here in this deep South. And today we want to focus in on really hammering home the battle between the Trump administration, some things President Trump has said, talking about how we need to handle that and discuss that and dealing with the Wisconsin fraud issue and going deep into this because this is leading up to a major fraud investigation that really needs to be looked at as far as the significance of what this means, not only for the Democratic Party and Republicans, but also for this nation as we head into 2026 and the midterms. So we're going to dive into that here today. So be sure to follow us along and listen and watch us on replay as well. Here at the comments that we have people joining in from Tennessee, Washington on YouTube, Northern California, and even down here in Mansfield, Louisiana. I'm going to look here on Rumble with some from Virginia, Cincinnati, Jim from Arizona, and Miss Rondi here in Shreveport. We love that you guys are following along with us here today. And if you want to help us grow, please leave a comment and share below as we want to start reaching, especially in this coming midterm cycle, those who are searching for answers, not just in news and information, but how to take that news and information and be watchmen on the wall, as you see with Nehemiah and in Jeremiah 33, where we have a calling to pray for our leaders, as even Daniel did in Daniel 9, and repenting for the nation. And so we hold that in high regard here as our calling and what we're walking out and why we're here on the Pipeline Report. So if you could, we know we don't ask for much here, but that is one of the things we do ask. And just let us know your thoughts as we go through these subjects today and prayer points as well. All right. So last week we had a big mistake, in all honesty, from Trump in coming out as the president of the United States and saying the infamous R word that we will not repeat on here because we will get banned and shut down, and we don't want to do that. So that's how we'll be regarding it. And I'm not going to play the clip of President Trump calling current Democratic governor of Wisconsin a special name. And now we're seeing the fallout of that from the people. I've heard videos and from reports of the family, his daughter, being very upset. Supposedly this happened when he was running as a presidential elect, and then with Kamala Harris as the VP candidate, his son got named, and this same thing happened. So they're really upset about this, and it's really just unbecoming of a president of the United States to say that. Now, is Trump wrong in pointing out the failures of the Waltz administration? No. Could he have done it a better way? Yeah, that's obvious. I think it would be very easy for Republicans to just come out and say that, and they're obviously going to have some conversations with Trump of be like, look, like, okay, we know culturally to an extent this is being accepted, but in reality, it's like, look, this is not something, and this is not a hill to die on at the end of the day. Like, okay, just apologize and move on type thing. That's all I want to touch there. But what we do want to dive into is the fact that there's major fraud going on in I'm going to share this screen here. It's from the Hill in Wisconsin, and for Governor Waltz, this is creating a very extreme pivot point for the Democratic Party to realize, like, okay, he's our governor. There are some supporters who end up becoming detractors. When you read this article here from the Hill, who say, he's done a good job, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the governor in dealing with this fraud issue. And I'm going to play some clips here from those within the Trump administration who call this out for what it is, as the single greatest theft of American taxpayer dollars, and more so, Wisconsin taxpayer dollars. So let's play that here, and we'll hear this played out.
Based on what we have found so far, we believe that the Somali fraud operation in Minnesota is the single greatest theft of taxpayer dollars through welfare fraud in American history. We believe that we have only scratched the very top of the surface of how deep this goes. And you're familiar with all the scams with pretending that children have autism who are not in fact autistic, with pretending to enroll people in food programs when in fact nobody was ever enrolled, and engaging in massive fraud, lying, and theft and grift on a scale we've never seen before in American history. The total bill, the total tab for this is going to be far beyond the numbers we've already seen reported. We believe the state government is fully complicit in this scheme, and we believe that what we are going to uncover is going to shock the American people. Look, based on the records that we already have, and this is a significant undercount, by the way, 75% of the Somali population in Minnesota is on welfare. But that's likely a significant undercount of just how much of a financial burden the Somali refugee population is imposing on this country.
So this is what the Trump administration will be focusing on here in the coming weeks. What is very Minnesota, excuse me, you're right, Greg. Wisconsin. No, Minnesota. What is very interesting is seeing something that Kayleigh McEnany found in a report that she did, an interview with Kelly Loeffler, the SBA president, Small Business Association president, where this investigation actually started under Attorney General Merrick Garland in the Biden administration. So let's play that. Is that ready, Eric?
But let's pull it up. The pages of the New York Times. And here you see they clearly denote the first public signs of a major problem in the state's service system started in 2022 when federal prosecutors began charging defendants in connection with the program. Merrick Garland, Attorney General for the Biden administration, called it the country's largest pandemic relief fraud scheme. That was 2022. Did your predecessor in the Biden administration pursue this? Because if I heard DOJ was looking into this at SBA, I would have looked into it as well.
No, Kayleigh, and that's what's troubling. When I came into the SBA on day one, I said we will have a zero tolerance policy on fraud. And so from day one, we've gone back to COVID-era loans that were forgiven under the Biden administration that had hold codes for fraud, for potential fraud. So we are going back thoroughly through the entire program, through multiple programs that the SBA operated, and ensuring that we go back and investigate that. And I'm grateful to the House and Senate for extending the statute of limitations to ensure that people don't have safe harbor simply by virtue of time running out to investigate, because the Biden administration did forgive billions of loans that they shouldn't have, and now we're able to go investigate those.
Yeah.
So we're seeing here that the current Small Business Association president looking into this and saying, hey, this is an investigation that Merrick Garland had kind of red flagged, and it should have been looked at. And unfortunately, it wasn't looked at the previous leaders in the Small Business Association administration under then President Biden. And so we're seeing now that the fraud, waste, and abuse goes far beyond just state and local level. This goes up to the highest ranks, and this is an issue that needs to be dealt with within the Democratic ranks. And Republicans could possibly be guilty of this, and there might be some issues there. And this is one of the things that the FBI is picking up on a lot of these cases. You're seeing the big case in sports where a couple weeks ago, some current basketball players who were playing got caught up in some wire fraud transfers and gambling issues, but those investigations were started under the Biden administration, and they just picked them up. They're continuing the job that was done before them, and they're upholding the laws here on the books. And this is all really key as we move forward to the midterms, because you got to look at it as there's a possibility that Tim Waltz, governor of Minnesota, could possibly run as a presidential candidate. So if this is the way that Democrats and the country are looking at him, then they're trying to say, like, okay, is this a possible one? And Trump's just saying, look, this is your possible candidate, because it's likely, if you look historically at, okay, there's the VP of the losing candidate. Does he try to run? More than likely. So Trump's trying to knock it down. And then on the fact of this is a major investigation from the previous administration, and it's something worth looking into. And if Merrick Garland himself is saying, look, there's major fraud here with these government assistance, just call it that, with helping kids get money within Minnesota, then you have these major populations that is being looked at of Somalians who I think have 50 arrests so far, and possibly more of locals who are there. You have local officials saying that there are not gangs, roaming gangs, even though there are people that the Attorney General within Minneapolis has let go, who was accused of harming, let's just say that, to be safe here on YouTube. A 15-year-old girl was caught, found guilty, she let him off, and then he went and did it again. So these are the type of people, catch and release, not holding people involved with their crimes. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it best. And I'll play that clip from him from Face the Nation on Sunday morning, where he describes the issue. He says, look, when you come here, there are some applications and there are some things that you have to do in order to start assimilating into this nation. And these people are not doing it, and they're having major fraud, waste, and abuse. Oh, yeah, here, let's do this. Sorry, technical difficulties.
A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud, including those who donated to the governor, donated to Representative Omar, and donated to A.G. Ellison. But they've been transferred to something called MBSs. And those are...
Mortgage-backed security? What do you mean?
Sorry?
Transferred to what?
These are money the Bureau services, and they are wire transfer organizations that are outside the regulated banking system. And that money has gone overseas, and we are tracking that both to the Middle East and to Somalia to see what the uses of that have been.
Okay, but you have no evidence of that money being used to fuel terrorism at this point, which is what some conservative writers are alleging.
That's why it's an investigation. We started it last week. We'll see where it goes. But I can tell you that, it's terrible. Representative Omar tried to downplay it, said, oh, it was very, it was very tough to know how this money should be used. Yeah. She was gaslighting the American people.
Well, we'll talk to her.
Yeah, but when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people.
And what's interesting here is the comments from Ilhan Omar, where she says that in regarding oh, we need to see where this money's going. We need to see what it's used for. But then at the same time, she came out over the weekend and also said that she's very upset that Wisconsin taxpayer dollars or Minnesota taxpayer dollars is, being defrauded and taken away from them. That could go to them. And the issue is it did go to you, and then it was used for fraud purposes and possibly terrorist funding. Who knows? And you can get into the semantics of whether they should let them use it to go out or stop it and prevent things. That's a whole, law enforcement argument that I think is neither here nor there. But it's something that I think we need to pray for, because if this type of stuff going, and this is a thing that happened during the COVID mishap of funding, of just handing out as much money as they possibly did, and people doing whatever they wanted with it with no checks and balances, because, you know, everybody was locked at home, you know, and so you couldn't really check it. So now they're going back and checking it, and there's a lot of people who got a lot of that money. And so the one thing we can say here is we did not take a single dime of that, and there are some organizations who did, and they have to weigh that balance between them. But the reality is, at the end of the day, is, okay, in this instance where you have key players, and it's interesting that President Trump and the administration is going after Ilhan Omar, is because the Ilhan Omar, AOC's, Rashida Tlaib, they're gaining momentum in the Democratic Party. And now Democrats, and what Trump's trying to appeal to is your old school Democrat, and even still new school Democrat who haven't switched over to vote for more so patriots, not just Republicans, but patriots in and of itself, because there's still Democrats who are more patriotic than the extreme regressive wing of the Democratic Party. And so it's trying to bring some balance back to the Democrats. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, that can't be done, they've gone too far. Maybe, but you can't fault Trump for at least trying to say, hey, look, here's a governor who has the responsibility to prevent these type of issues from happening, and ultimately it falls on his desk, but he's responsible. Now, how deep does this go? We don't know. And they're not accusing him. They're saying, look, based on what we found, this is what we found. But we also believe there might be more. And so they're going to go through and investigate. They're going to go through and see. And, you know, Stephen Miller said, well, we believe it's going to be the biggest uncovering of fraud found in this country. We'll have to see. And the only thing in this situation we want to pray for is that the truth would come out, because you're going to start hearing it more and more and more on the news as this becomes the focus, and especially with Trump's comments on the governor and the public's response. And if you think about it, these are his neighbors. Like, he lives in a very wealthy area. These are people who live around him. Yeah, there might be some people driving from out of town or different parts of town to go out to where he lives and saying the things they're saying, but these are his neighbors. And it's somewhat hilarious, but then also kind of sad that his neighbors would stoop to that kind of level and go there. And this is not ultimately what we need for the future of America and relationship-wise there. And so hopefully that can be walked back, those comments, and there can be some bridge there. Maybe not, but at the end of the day is we have to realize that at the end of the day, this needs to be looked at. This needs to be dealt with, and then how far it goes. And for all those Republicans and libertarians and the middle grounders who are complaining about foreign aid, foreign this, foreign that, like, let this investigation happen. They're kind of staying silent, as Governor Waltz said. If you're not careful, these people are these Trump people, as he calls them, brainwashed, and his family calls them brainwashed, the cult members, which there might be some who are. If you can't say that statistically, it's more than likely. But the reality is like, look, he's saying these people are going to be violent. They're going to turn to violent. Well, okay, let's take that analogy and that logic there and apply that to Democrats. We're seeing it actually happen. I don't know how many people follow, but the report last night that a YouTuber by the name of Tim Pool was under fire, legitimate like ammo gunfire, because somebody rolled up to his property and just popped off shots. He lives out in West Virginia. I followed him for years. And this is actually an actual leftist coming after him and trying to take out him and his team and his family and et cetera, things like that. This is being said about Republicans, but it's happening from Democrats. And this is not the first time Tim Pool has been shot at, come under fire from people in law enforcement or not in law enforcement. He's been the term swatted before. And so, and hey, you take Charlie Kirk. You take Senator Steve Scalise, or Congressman Steve Scalise, excuse me, and how he is actually shot by a Bernie supporter, and all these shootings and all these things that are happening. It comes out there's something where they agree with part of the Democratic platform, and they're the ones doing the violent acts. So if that's going to be said by Governor Waltz, he's got to look at the reality of the situation and say, okay, who's the one actually committing the crimes? And then you get into the Second Amendment issue and everything there. So the reality is we want the truth to come forward. That's what we want to pray for. Pray for peace for that. And when you hear this story, don't let yourself be brought to anger. Let yourself be brought to a place of prayer that the truth could come forward and that our emotions don't get so tied to what we're hearing on the news. We can gather information. Okay, let's do it to a point, but got to catch yourself. And look, I'm fully aware. That's why I try my best. Eric and the team here ask me, who am I watching? Who am I listening to? I'm telling them I try my best not to listen to mainstream media because it's just going to get you into a frenzy because that's what they're really good at. If you want to get really angry, sit down in front of CNN or sit down in front of Fox and et cetera. And they know how to pull heartstrings and they're very good at it. And they made a lot of money doing it for quite a long time. But the reality is look, let's gather information, take it to the Lord. How can we proceed through this with a healthy manner of being able to still love our neighbor through this? And I think that's what's being lost right now in this season. But as we move forward into the voting cycle and even into this current Congress and heading towards the end of the year, we had the continuing resolution there where last month, the huge government shutdown and a big issue was healthcare. And now we're seeing healthcare come back up as the fight for that comes up. And I think one of the greatest things for the Trump administration and for Speaker Johnson is the fact that you have this issue where, well, this money's not going to illegals, this money's not going to anybody but, people in need and Americans. Well, the reality is here's one instance with the money going to people in Minnesota and it being used for fraud. Now let's start looking at the same type of investigation into the healthcare. And you know what can happen is because you have more than likely multiple teams doing these type of investigations on both healthcare, the ACA Affordable Care Act or the Obamacare, and even the fraud in Minnesota, is that there are thank you, Eric. There are teams coming together trying to strategize. What are we looking for? What are we seeing? And in instances like these, they're more than likely going to start doing the same thing. Putting kids who don't have autism on there, who do have autism, so they get more money, or have this sickness and can get that, et cetera, stuff like that. So there's ways for them to look at this and go about this and uncovering. And we just want to pray for the uncovering to be done. Sorry, I need a drink there. And in the thumbnail, I put, Trump uncovering some bank fraud there. The reality is look, the more that actually gets looked at, and this isn't just from Republicans, this isn't just from Trump. Go back to what Kelly Loeffler said. AG Merrick Garland started this investigation, and her words are this, that Merrick Garland called the Minnesota fraud scheme the country's largest pandemic relief fund scheme when he was prosecuting these cases in 2022. That's Merrick Garland. Like, we have major flaws with how Merrick Garland operated as Attorney General. But he was even saying that this is a problem. If a Democrat AG is saying this, who, you probably shouldn't want him in office, this is what he says. Okay, I think there's some win there and some room for them to look at it. And I think it's very healthy for them to go in and look at this. Because, again, this starts dealing with, one, the midterms, but two, also the next presidential election where Tim Walz is being considered, looked at as a possible presidential nominee. And then he's also in the process of running for re-election in Minnesota for governor again. That's for a third term. That's being squashed as some very high-level Democratic donors are saying, it's time for you to back out. You get a stain on your record. Not necessarily, hey, we need to look in this, we need to deal with this. It's that, well, to our advantage, we're going to take you out so we can put somebody else in for their agenda. So that's kind of a key point there to look at. And the last thing I want to close out today, as I'm still struggling with some nasal issues and breathing, is leading up to the 2026 election. We're seeing a lot of people make a lot of noise, and Marjorie Taylor Greene come out on 60 Minutes yesterday, which it's quite hilarious. Next week we can dive into it about her reasoning for stepping down, and in her own words, it's the fact that she didn't want to have a loss on her record. But I digress from that, because as we head towards the end of 2025, when we close out well, we want to close out and more so begin 2026 on a strong point, a standing point where we understand the battle ahead. And what we know from the battle ahead is that I'll send the links to this article in the show notes below. But there's a good article from the Daily Caller talking about how the House faces mass exodus of nearly 10% of those foregoing elections. And so you see that and you think, well, that's a big number. That's a lot of people. It's around 40 people. 23 Republicans, 17 Democrats who are leaving. And historically, what you do when you see this, and this article does a very good job of pointing this out, where when there are those who have, when a party has a majority and there are safe seats, safe areas where somebody can easily be replaced who are of, say, Democrat, Republican, depending on who's in power. In this instance, it's Republicans. So you have more Republicans who are tired of the nonsense of Washington, D.C., just want to go back to life and not have to deal with just the nonsense. You know, they thought they loved it, but in reality, they don't, and that's fair. Some of them are looking for re-election into other offices, you know, going up to the Senate, going up to state level, AG, state governor races, other, you know, state congressmen, etc. They're looking to make different positions. They want to be more effectual. And this is what Congress is meant for. This is how the founders created Congress, to be slow and tedious and making sure that the whims and emotions of the nation and of the leader doesn't erode the ruling principles of the House of Representatives. And so a lot of them get worn out from this. And, you know, you lose some good ones, but more so you lose some bad ones. And that's part of the purification process of this. And what you also see is some just straight out retiring. They don't want to do it. I want to make sure I cover my notes here. But a bulk of these seats that are, especially for the Republicans, I think 22 of them, they're in safe areas. There's all but one, I think somewhere in Virginia, that is a possible Democratic flip. But then there's also the key reason that a lot of them are looking at resigning on both sides is the redistricting that you see in Texas and California and possibly in Virginia, Louisiana, and elsewhere. We've gone through that before, so that battle is going to be one coming up ahead. So I just throw that out there as kind of, all right, put that on the shelf. This is what we're going to start praying for in the future. But historically, so you're not alarmed that, oh, wow, 40 people resigning, that must be a lot. Well, let's go back a few years where we've had midterm elections. In 2023, you had 30, both sides resign and step away. In 2018, you had 42, so we're not there yet. So it's happened before. It's not at the highest level. And then in 2017, you have 32. So it's a frequent number. You're in the 30s and 40s there, where this is not even the highest yet. Maybe there's one or two more. We'll see. Some of them even know their replacements of who they're going to be. And so they're there moving in that direction of stepping down because they're tired. They want to go somewhere else. They want to be more effectual. They want to get back to life. One the representative talked about, he's like, look, I have a beautiful wife at home. I have kids who are, 13, 12, et cetera, and they need me. And I mean, you can't argue with that. Hey, go be a family man. And that's probably one of the best things he can do, have an effect on society rather than being a U.S. Congressman. So with that being said, we see the battles ahead. We see what is coming before us. And now that means there's 40 people that we got to start praying for, at least just in the House of Representatives, not even including the others who are seeking re-election, which is everybody. And then also you have the Senate and governor's races, et cetera. So there's a lot to look forward to. And I know on Tuesday they do a great job. The team there does a great job of focusing in on these races. And this is what 2026 will be focused on as we come through this holiday season. And they're going to start in January, start dealing with the healthcare issue. We'll dive more into that and making sure that we're standing on the wall for our leaders, for our nation, so that we don't get blindsided by, what's going on in the world and what could possibly come in and creep in and erode the pillars of the foundation of this country. So with that, I'm going to close out and thank each and every one of you for following along here today. Again, let's remember, just to recap here, let's continue to pray for President Trump, the administration, and these investigations that they're going on, that the truth would be uncovered, that if there is fraud, that those who are committing it would ultimately be found. And, we're sitting here with $36 trillion in debt and, $8 billion, $1 billion doesn't seem like a lot compared to trillions, but every little bit counts. And ultimately we got to start the hard process of turning back the other direction, of cutting costs. And this is one of the ways that unfortunately has to be done. And this is, again, things and investigations started by AG Merrick Garland under the Biden administration in 2022, where they understood that it was massive fraud. So this has to be found out. This has to be looked into. This is a hill to die on. This is something that needs our prayers, that those investigating it can have clarity, focus, and that they don't mess up and try something, just to catch somebody because they believe. Stephen Miller even said, we believe. Okay, you believe this, but now you got to go find it. And you got to be objective, and you got to be able to prove it in front of a judge. Then that gets into another layer of prayer that we need to get into, of praying for the judges, that they hear the case properly, that lawyers argue the case properly, and prosecutors make sure that, they're not throwing in something that can discredit the case. So a lot to, be mindful of and aware of, but then also as we head into this season, as we're continuing, I don't know if a lot of people are, continuing the Thankful Journal, as Pastor Tim had, thrown out there to do 30 days of thankfulness as we come, out of the Thanksgiving season and into the Christmas season, and just reminding ourselves of what we have to be thankful for. And we do have a lot to be thankful for. And yeah, there's, in a sense, mass chaos everywhere in the government because of this, that, and the other. But in reality look, we still have a nation that operates on biblical moral values, whether, Democrats agree with that and even Republicans agree or disagree with that, look, the basis of our society is based upon the words in this here text. And we want to continue to uphold that. That's why we're here, continuing to just push information down the pipeline to you guys. And so we want to continue doing that as we lead into the midterms, and ask you guys to just share, like, subscribe to help us grow, and which really helps us there. The algorithm really likes that, so we can get this information to people who are searching, who are trying to find hope when they listen to news, who are trying to find ways to interact with other intercessors here locally, but then also throughout this nation and the rest of the world. So blessings to each and every one of you who follow along, and we'll be back tomorrow with our regular noon prayer with the team. And we'll close out this week with our regular events here locally. For those who are watching and want to come locally, we have our Wednesday night service. And then we'll be back Sunday morning and back here in the studio as well. So blessings, and I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.